What happened when you finally stood up to your toxic boss? The sound of Marcus's fist slamming against the conference table made everyone jump, including me. But this time, instead of shrinking back like I had for the past 2 years, I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Sarah's little pet project here, he said, his voice dripping with condescension as he gestured toward the presentation screen, shows exactly why I don't let coordinators handle real strategy anymore. My pet project. The campaign that had pulled the Meridian account back from the brink of cancellation just 3 weeks ago. The campaign that had taken me 4 months of 18-hour days and weekend research to develop. The campaign that had already generated $2.3 million in renewed contracts. As you can see, Marcus continued, clicking through slides that contained my analysis, my creative concepts, my strategic recommendations. The integrated approach I developed really speaks to the client's core values. I watched him present my work to the executive team, word for word, number for number, while I sat at the far end of the table like a secretary taking notes. Jim Peterson from corporate was nodding approvingly. Lisa Chen from finance was already calculating the bonus potential. And Marcus was soaking up every bit of their praise like he'd done anything other than spell my name wrong in emails about it. The ROI projections Marcus developed are particularly impressive, Jim said, leaning forward. This kind of strategic thinking is exactly what we need more of. Thank you, Marcus replied smoothly. It's what happens when you really understand the market dynamics at play. Market dynamics. The man who'd asked me last month what CTR stood for was talking about market dynamics. Which brings me to an important organizational announcement, Marcus continued, and something in his tone made my stomach drop. After careful consideration, I've decided that Sarah's role needs to be restructured. She'll be transitioning from marketing coordinator to marketing assistant, effective immediately. The coordinator responsibilities will be distributed among team members who demonstrated more strategic capability. The room went silent. Marketing assistant. A $15,000 pay cut and a title I'd held 3 years ago when I first started here. This will allow Sarah to focus on what she does best, supporting the team's strategic initiatives rather than trying to develop them independently. Heat flooded my face as every person in that room avoided eye contact with me. They all knew. They all knew this was my campaign, my strategy, my work. But nobody was going to say a word because Marcus held their performance reviews in his hands. Any questions about the transition? Marcus asked, looking directly at me with those pale blue eyes that had intimidated me into silence so many times before. And that's when it happened. That's when 2 years of documentation, 2 years of watching him steal credit and destroy confidence, 2 years of knowing about the $47,000 in fraudulent expense reports sitting in my desk drawer, crystallized into perfect, surgical clarity. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my black blazer, and smiled at him. Just one question, Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear. When you present these results to the Meridian client next week, will you be explaining how you developed this strategy, or would you prefer that I walk them through the creative process myself? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his smile never wavered. I think that's quite enough strategic input from you for today, Sarah. Oh, I said, still smiling, I'm just getting started. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Marcus's face had gone from smug satisfaction to something resembling concern, but he was still trying to play it off with that practiced executive charm. Sarah, I think you're a bit emotional right now, he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used whenever someone questioned him. Why don't you take the rest of the day to process this transition? We can discuss your concerns privately tomorrow. Emotional. The word he'd used to dismiss me dozens of times over the past 2 years. The same word he'd used when I'd questioned why my name wasn't on the Morrison presentation. The same word he'd used when I'd asked why Jennifer from his previous company had suddenly quit after just 6 weeks. Actually, I'm thinking very clearly, I replied, reaching into my portfolio and pulling out a manila folder. In fact, I've been thinking clearly for quite some time now. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, a printed email chain from 4 months ago when I'd initially pitched the Meridian campaign concept to Marcus. The timestamp was crystal clear, February 15th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. My detailed strategy outline, my market research, my creative concepts, all there in black and white. This is the original strategic proposal for the Meridian campaign, I said, setting it on the table where everyone could see it. Submitted to Marcus on February 15th. You'll notice the comprehensive competitor analysis on page 3, including the insight about Meridian's sustainability blind spot that became the cornerstone of our positioning. Jim Peterson leaned forward, his eyebrows furrowing as he scanned the document. Lisa Chen was already reaching for her copy. Marcus's smile was starting to crack around the edges. Sarah, internal communications between team members aren't really appropriate for. Oh, but external communications are different, aren't they? I interrupted, pulling out another document. This is the email Marcus sent to Jim on February 28th, presenting what he called his breakthrough strategy for the Meridian account. I placed the second document next to the first. The similarities were impossible to ignore, entire paragraphs copied verbatim, my research citations included, even my spelling error of complimentary instead of complimentary in the third bullet point. Interesting coincidence, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. 13 days after I submitted my proposal, Marcus had his strategic breakthrough. Right down to the same typo. The room was so quiet I could hear the HVAC system humming. Marcus was no longer smiling at all. His face had gone pale, and I could see a thin line of sweat forming along his hairline. This is completely inappropriate, he said, standing up abruptly. Sarah, you're clearly having some kind of episode. Jim, I think we need to discuss this privately. Episode? I repeated, and for the first time in 2 years, I actually laughed at something Marcus said. Marcus, the only episode here is the systematic pattern of plagiarism and credit theft that's been happening in this department for the past 18 months. I pulled out a third document. Then a fourth. Then a fifth. The Davidson proposal from last September, my work. The social media strategy that won the Henderson account, also mine. The competitive analysis that saved the Patterson contract, well, you can probably guess. Each document landed on the table with a soft thud that might as well have been thunder. Jim Peterson's face was growing darker with each revelation, and I could see Lisa Chen frantically taking notes. But Marcus wasn't done fighting. Jim, you can't possibly believe this fabrication, he said, his voice rising. Sarah has been underperforming for months. This is clearly a desperate attempt to. Underperforming? I cut him off. That's interesting. Because I have something else you might want to see. I reached into my portfolio again, but this time I pulled out a thick stack of papers bound with a black binder clip. The weight of it in my hands felt like justice. Performance reviews, I announced, setting the stack down with a satisfying thump. 24 months of them, to be exact. Including the ones Marcus never gave me copies of. Marcus's face went completely white. How did you? Those are confidential personnel documents. Confidential documents that were left on the printer in the copy room? I raised an eyebrow. The same printer where you've been making personal copies for your son's school projects? Interesting filing system you have there, Marcus. Jim Peterson was already reaching for the performance reviews, his expression shifting from confusion to something much more serious. Marcus, what is she talking about? I flipped to a marked page in the stack. March 2024 Performance Review. Marcus rated my work on the Henderson campaign as below expectations and noted that I lacked strategic thinking capabilities. But here's what's interesting, I pulled out another document from my seemingly endless folder. This is the email Marcus sent to the Henderson client the day after that review, praising what he called his innovative strategic approach to their account. The same strategic approach he'd just rated as below expectations when I created it. Lisa Chen was practically scribbling smoke across her notepad. Marcus, these are some serious discrepancies. This is a witch hunt, Marcus snapped, but his voice cracked slightly on the word hunt. Jim, Sarah has been insubordinate for months. She's clearly doctored these documents to support some kind of harassment claim. Harassment claim? I repeated, and I felt that cold clarity expand in my chest like ice forming on a lake. That's another interesting choice of words, Marcus. I reached into my portfolio one more time, and Marcus actually took a step backward. Jennifer Walsh, I said simply, placing a printed email on the table. Your previous hire who quit after 6 weeks. This is her exit interview with HR from January 15th. Very illuminating reading. Marcus's hands were visibly shaking now. That's privileged information. Information that was CC'd to all department heads as part of the harassment prevention briefing, I continued smoothly. Including detailed accounts of inappropriate comments about female employees' appearance, unwanted touching during meetings, and, my personal favorite, Marcus's habit of scheduling one-on-one meetings with female staff members at restaurants after work hours. Jim Peterson's face had gone from dark to thunderous. Marcus, is this true? Absolutely not, Marcus said quickly, but sweat was now visible on his forehead. This is clearly a coordinated attack on my character. Sarah has been planning this for months. You're absolutely right, I said, cutting him off again. I have been planning this for months. Very carefully. The admission seemed to stun everyone in the room, including Marcus. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Because someone who steals credit, falsifies performance reviews, creates hostile work environments, and commits expense fraud deserves careful planning. The words expense fraud hit the room like a bomb. Lisa Chen's pen actually stopped moving. Jim Peterson slowly set down the performance reviews and looked directly at me. Expense fraud, he said quietly. I smiled and reached for my portfolio one final time. Oh yes. That's the really interesting part. Marcus made a strangled sound and lurched toward the door, but I was faster. $47,000, I said clearly. Over 18 months. Personal dinners, his son's baseball equipment, even a weekend trip to Cabo that was supposedly a client meeting with a company that doesn't exist. Marcus's hand froze on the door handle. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The sound Marcus made when I mentioned the $47,000 wasn't quite human. It was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper, and it told everyone in the room exactly what they needed to know about the accuracy of my accusation. Sit down, Marcus, Jim Peterson said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown executives wet themselves. Right now. Marcus's hand slipped off the door handle like his bones had turned to jelly. He stumbled back to his chair, but he didn't sit, he perched on the edge like he was ready to bolt at any second. Sarah, Jim continued, I need you to be very specific about what you're alleging here. I opened the final section of my folder, the one I'd organized with colored tabs and page numbers like a legal brief. Because after 2 years of Marcus's gaslighting, I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Gladly, I said, pulling out the first expense report. March 15, 2024. Marcus submitted a receipt for $347 at Morton Steakhouse, claiming it was a client dinner with representatives from Pacific Industries. The problem is, I called Pacific Industries to confirm some contract details the next week. They haven't had dinner with anyone from our company in over 8 months. I slid the receipt across the table, along with a printed email from Pacific Industries confirming their last meeting date. But that's not even the creative part, I continued. The really interesting charges started in January. $1,200 at Dick's Sporting Goods for promotional materials. Except when I called Dick's to inquire about bulk promotional pricing for our spring campaign, they told me the transaction was for youth baseball equipment. Specifically, a Louisville Slugger bat, cleats, and a team bag. Marcus's face had gone from white to green. My son, that was a legitimate promotional expense. Your son plays for the Westfield Tigers, I interrupted. I know because you've mentioned his games during at least 15 meetings when you were explaining why you had to leave early on Fridays. Tell me, Marcus, how exactly does Little League equipment promote our marketing services? Lisa Chen was writing so furiously I thought her pen might catch fire. What else? She asked without looking up. Well, there's a $2,800 weekend at the Pueblo Bonito Resort in Cabo, allegedly for meetings with Cervantes Marketing Solutions, I said, pulling out another receipt. Cervantes Marketing Solutions was dissolved in 2019. I had the business registration documents from the California Secretary of State's office. I placed the dissolution paperwork next to the resort receipts. Marcus looked like he was about to vomit. Then there's my personal favorite, I continued, warming up to my finale. $850 at Tiffany & Co. for client appreciation gifts. Specifically, a pair of diamond earrings purchased on February 14th, Valentine's Day. For his wife, according to the engraving that reads, to Diana, all my love, M. The room was dead silent except for the sound of Lisa's pen and Marcus's increasingly labored breathing. Diana is your wife, isn't she, Marcus? I asked sweetly. Not a client? Jim Peterson stood up so abruptly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Marcus, you need to leave this room immediately while we discuss next steps. Don't touch your computer, don't access any files, and don't speak to anyone about this meeting. Jim, you have to understand, Marcus started, his voice cracking completely now. The pressure in this position, the expectations. Out, Jim said simply. Marcus stumbled toward the door like a broken marionette, but he stopped and turned back to face me. For just a moment, I saw something dangerous flicker in his pale blue eyes. You have no idea what you've just done to yourself, Sarah, he said quietly. No idea at all. The threat hung in the air like smoke, but I was surprised to discover I wasn't afraid anymore. Actually, I replied, I know exactly what I'd done. After Marcus left, the silence in the conference room felt different, heavier somehow, like a moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Jim Peterson was staring at the stack of evidence I'd laid out, methodically going through each document with the precision of a surgeon. Lisa Chen had filled 3 pages with notes and was starting a 4th. Sarah, Jim said finally, not looking up from Marcus's fabricated expense report for the Cervantes meeting, how long have you known about all of this? The expense fraud? About 14 months, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I discovered it by accident when I was looking for the Brennan Industries contract in Marcus's office. He'd left his corporate card statements on his desk, and some of the charges seemed odd. And you didn't report it then because? The question I'd been dreading. Because the honest answer made me look almost as bad as Marcus, like someone who'd been collecting ammunition instead of doing the right thing. Because I had no credibility, I said simply. Marcus had spent 18 months systematically destroying my professional reputation. Every time I questioned something, I was emotional or difficult to work with or struggling with feedback. If I'd walked into HR 14 months ago with fraud allegations against the golden boy who'd just landed the Morrison contract, they would have assumed you were a disgruntled employee trying to cause trouble, Lisa finished, nodding slowly. Exactly. So I started documenting everything. Every stolen idea, every falsified review, every questionable expense. I needed enough evidence to make the pattern undeniable. Jim looked up from the papers, his expression unreadable. Sarah, what you presented here is comprehensive. Almost like you built a legal case. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I wanted to be thorough. Thorough enough to have copies of confidential HR documents, internal expense records, and personnel files you shouldn't have had access to. The room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Lisa Chen's pen stopped moving for the first time since I'd started talking. Are you asking if I obtained information illegally? I asked carefully. I'm asking how a marketing coordinator got access to sensitive company documents that are typically restricted to management level and above. My mouth went dry. In all my careful planning, I'd focused so intently on building an airtight case against Marcus that I hadn't fully considered how obtaining that evidence might look to upper management. The performance reviews were left on the printer, I said. The expense reports were visible on Marcus's desk when he asked me to retrieve other files from his office. The HR documents about Jennifer Walsh were part of the harassment prevention briefing that was sent to all department heads, including Marcus, who forwarded it to me for filing. And you kept copies of all of these documents for over a year without reporting what you'd found, Jim said slowly. Yes. While continuing to work under Marcus, taking assignments from him, participating in team meetings where he presented your work as his own. Yes. The implications of what Jim was suggesting hit me like cold water. By not reporting Marcus's misconduct immediately, had I become complicit in it? By collecting evidence over 18 months, had I crossed the line from victim to co-conspirator? Jim, Lisa interjected, given the pattern of behavior Sarah's documented, and considering Marcus's response when confronted with the evidence, I think we need to focus on the substance of these allegations rather than. The substance is exactly what I'm concerned about, Jim cut her off. Because if even half of what Sarah is alleging is true, it means Marcus has been defrauding this company for over a year while she watched it happen. The words hung in the air like an accusation. I felt the careful confidence I'd built over months of planning start to crack around the edges. I wasn't watching it happen, I said, hearing my voice get smaller. I was being systematically undermined and gaslit by someone who controlled my career prospects. I was trying to build a case that would actually stick. Or, Jim replied quietly, you were building leverage. The word leverage hit me like a physical blow. I felt my carefully constructed composure start to crumble as the full implications of Jim's accusation sank in. Leverage? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You think I've been blackmailing Marcus? I think, Jim said, leaning back in his chair, that a marketing coordinator who discovers her boss is committing fraud and doesn't report it for 14 months might have other motivations for staying quiet. Lisa Chen was watching this exchange like a tennis match, her pen hovering over her notepad. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. If I'd been complicit in Marcus's fraud, the company's liability would shift dramatically. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though part of me already knew where this was heading. I'm suggesting that maybe you didn't report Marcus's misconduct because you were benefiting from it somehow. Maybe you were getting preferential treatment in exchange for your silence. Better assignments, flexible schedules, performance bonuses. Performance bonuses? I almost laughed, but the sound came out bitter and sharp. Jim, have you looked at my compensation history? I haven't received a merit increase in 18 months. My last performance review was so bad it disqualified me from the annual bonus pool entirely. I pulled out another document from my folder, my compensation history going back 3 years. Here. Look at the numbers. If I was getting kickbacks from Marcus, he was doing a terrible job of paying me off. Jim studied the document, his frown deepening. Then explained the timeline, Sarah. 14 months of evidence collection. Why now? Why today, right after Marcus announced her demotion? Because today he crossed the line I couldn't uncross, I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. For 2 years, I told myself I could handle the credit theft, the public humiliation, the gaslighting. I thought if I just worked harder, produced better results, eventually the truth would speak for itself. But it didn't. No, it didn't. It got worse. And when Marcus stood up there today and presented my campaign, the campaign that saved Meridian, that I spent 4 months developing, when he presented it as his own work and then demoted me for lacking strategic capability, I realized something. Which was that this would never stop. That Marcus would keep stealing my work, keep destroying my reputation, keep pushing me down until I disappeared entirely. And that no one would ever hold him accountable unless I made it impossible for them to ignore. Jim was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was trying to read something written there in invisible ink. The timing is still problematic, Sarah. It looks retaliatory. Of course it's retaliatory, I said, surprising myself with the admission. Marcus has been retaliating against me for 2 years every time I questioned something or showed initiative. The only difference is that now I'm retaliating back. Lisa Chen looked up from her notes. Sarah, are you saying this is revenge? I considered the question carefully, because I knew my answer would probably determine everything that happened next. No, I said finally. Revenge would be spreading rumors or sabotaging Marcus's projects or trying to turn the team against him. This is accountability. Every document in this folder represents something Marcus did that violated company policy, federal regulations, or basic ethical standards. I didn't fabricate anything or exaggerate anything. I just kept receipts. Jim's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a grimace. That's Marcus requesting an emergency meeting with HR to discuss your erratic behavior and possible security breach. My stomach dropped. He's trying to flip the script. He's trying to save his career, Lisa corrected. The question is whether he still can. Jim Peterson's phone rang again, and this time he answered it on the first ring. Peterson here, he said, his voice clipped and professional. What? Slow down, Karen. What do you mean he's already there? I watched Jim's face shift from confusion to alarm as he listened to whoever was on the other end. Presumably Karen from HR. Lisa Chen had stopped taking notes entirely and was staring at Jim with growing concern. How long ago? Jim asked. And he brought what with him? Jesus Christ. Okay, don't let him touch anything else. We'll be right there. He hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sarah, Marcus is in HR right now filing a formal complaint against you for theft of confidential documents, corporate espionage, and making false accusations to damage his reputation. My blood turned to ice water. Corporate espionage? He's claiming you've been systematically stealing sensitive company information to build a case for wrongful termination. He's also alleging that you've been secretly recording meetings and conversations without consent. That's ridiculous, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I realized how my months of careful documentation could be twisted into something more sinister. I never recorded anything. Everything I have came from documents that were left out or legitimately forwarded to me. He's also claiming, Jim continued, that you approached him 3 months ago offering to keep quiet about alleged irregularities in exchange for a promotion to senior marketing coordinator. The accusation hit me like a physical slap. That's a complete lie. Is it? Lisa asked quietly. Because Karen said Marcus brought email printouts with him. Communications between you and him discussing career advancement and your concerns about department operations. My mind raced back 3 months, trying to remember what I might have written to Marcus that could be twisted into blackmail. Then it hit me. The May 15th email, I said, reaching for my phone to check my sent messages. I sent Marcus a message asking to discuss my career trajectory and some concerns I had about department efficiency. But it wasn't blackmail. I was trying to address the credit theft professionally before escalating it. What exactly did you write? Jim asked. I found the email and read it aloud, my voice getting smaller with each word. Marcus, I'd like to schedule time to discuss my role in the recent campaign successes and how we might better align credit attribution with actual work contributions going forward. I believe there are some operational inefficiencies that could be addressed to benefit both the department and my professional development. I'm hoping we can resolve these concerns internally before they become larger issues. The silence that followed was deafening. Oh, Sarah, Lisa said softly. That's not blackmail, I insisted, but I could hear how weak it sounded. I was trying to give him a chance to do the right thing. Before they become larger issues, Jim repeated. Sarah, that's textbook extortion language. You were threatening to escalate unless he gave you what you wanted. No, I was trying to. I stopped, realizing that my intentions didn't matter if Marcus could make it look like something else. He never responded to that email. We never had that meeting. Instead, my next performance review was even worse than usual. Jim's phone buzzed with a text. He read it and his face went pale. Karen says Marcus has requested that building security escort you from the premises pending the investigation. He's claiming you might destroy evidence or compromise other confidential files. The room started spinning slightly around the edges. In the span of 30 minutes, I'd gone from exposing Marcus's fraud to being accused of corporate espionage and extortion. This is what he does, I said desperately. This is exactly what he does. He twists everything, makes you question your own memory, turns your words against you. He's been gaslighting me for 2 years, and now he's doing it to all of you. But I could see in their faces that the seed of doubt had already been planted. Actually, Lisa Chen said suddenly, looking up from her notes with a strange expression, there's something that doesn't add up. Both Jim and I turned to stare at her. She was flipping back through the pages she'd been scribbling on, her pen tapping against the table in a rapid staccato. Marcus said Sarah approached him 3 months ago about keeping quiet in exchange for a promotion, right? Lisa continued. But look at the timeline of evidence she presented. The Tiffany receipt for his wife's Valentine's gift? That was February 14th. The Cabo trip? March 8th through 10th. The Dick's Sporting Goods purchase? March 22nd. I felt a flicker of hope. What are you getting at? If Sarah was blackmailing Marcus starting in May, why did he continue committing fraud for 3 more months after she allegedly threatened him? That's either the stupidest criminal in corporate history, or Marcus is lying, Jim finished slowly. Lisa nodded, pulling out her phone. Karen, it's Lisa. I need you to ask Marcus a specific question before we get there. She paused, listening. Ask him to explain why he continued submitting questionable expenses after Sarah's alleged extortion attempt. We have receipts dated well after May 15th. The silence stretched for nearly a minute while Lisa listened to Karen relay the question. I could hear Marcus's voice through the phone, higher pitched than usual, talking fast. Lisa said. And when did he say this escalation occurred? July? But the Dick's Sporting Goods charge was March 22nd, which is. I see. And he's sure about that timeline? She hung up and looked at both of us with something approaching satisfaction. Marcus just told Karen that Sarah's extortion attempts escalated in July, which is why he had to submit those equipment purchases for his son in March. He also claimed the Cabo trip happened after Sarah started threatening him, but he can't explain why his own credit card statements show it was in March. Jim Peterson rubbed his temples. So he's either lying about the timeline, or he's admitting to committing fraud after being blackmailed, which makes him look even worse. There's more, Lisa continued. Karen asked him to provide the email evidence he brought, and apparently Marcus printed out Sarah's May 15th message, but he also included his response to it. The response he sent 2 days later. My heart stopped. He did respond? I never got a response. Because he apparently sent it to his personal email account and then forwarded it from there. Karen read it to me. Lisa consulted her notes. Quote, Sarah, your concerns about attribution are noted but misguided. The collaborative nature of our team means individual credit is less important than collective success. I suggest focusing on improving your strategic thinking skills rather than tracking who contributed what to various projects. We can discuss your career development after your next quarterly review. End quote. Jim's eyebrows shot up. That's not the response of someone being blackmailed. It gets better, Lisa said with grim satisfaction. The email metadata shows it was sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday. Karen asked Marcus why he was sending professional correspondence from his personal email at midnight on the weekend, and he claimed he was too upset by Sarah's threats to respond through normal channels. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 20 minutes. That's not how someone responds to extortion. That's how someone responds to a subordinate they think they can continue to manipulate. Jim's phone rang again, and this time he put it on speaker. Jim, it's Karen. We have a problem. I asked Marcus to walk me through his evidence chronologically, and his story keeps changing. Now he's claiming Sarah has been psychologically manipulating him for over a year, making him so paranoid and stressed that he made poor financial decisions as a coping mechanism. He's saying I made him commit fraud? I asked incredulously. It's worse than that, Karen continued. He just accused Sarah of seducing him into inappropriate behavior and then using it as blackmail material. He's claiming there was a sexual relationship that Sarah leveraged for career advancement. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the color drain from my face as the full implications sank in. That's a complete lie, I whispered. But I could already see how this would play out in Marcus's favor, the manipulative female employee who seduced her married boss and then blackmailed him when things went south. The accusation of seduction hung in the air like poison gas. I could feel my carefully constructed case crumbling in real time, because I knew how these things worked. Once that particular allegation was made, everything else would be viewed through that lens. Every late night, I'd stay to finish projects Marcus had dumped on me at 4 p.m. Every time he'd asked me to dinner to discuss strategy, and I'd politely declined. Every professional interaction would be re-examined and twisted into evidence of some imaginary affair. Karen, Jim said into the speaker, his voice deadly calm, did Marcus provide any evidence to support this new allegation? He's claiming there are text messages, but he says Sarah made him delete them because she was paranoid about getting caught. He also mentioned dinners at Romano's and after-hours meetings in his office. My hands started shaking. Jim, I have never, not once, had any kind of inappropriate relationship with Marcus. The only dinners I've had with him were team dinners with at least 4 other people present. And the after-hours meetings he's talking about were when he'd dump urgent projects on me at the last minute and then leave while I stayed to finish them. But even as I said it, I realized how easily Marcus could spin those situations. Sarah staying late, alone in the office. Sarah working weekends on special projects. Sarah being defensive when questioned about her relationship with her boss. There's something else, Karen's voice crackled through the speaker. Marcus is now claiming that Sarah's evidence folder proves she was planning this for months as part of an elaborate extortion scheme. He says no innocent employee would have kept such detailed records unless they were building a blackmail case. Lisa Chen looked up from her notes with a frown. Wait, that doesn't make sense with his timeline either. If Sarah was allegedly having an affair with Marcus and collecting blackmail material, why would she need to seduce him into inappropriate behavior? The behavior would already be inappropriate. Because he's making it up as he goes, I said desperately. This is what Marcus does when he's cornered, he throws out accusations until something sticks. He's hoping that if he makes me look unstable or manipulative enough, no one will believe the fraud evidence. Jim's expression was unreadable. Sarah, I need to ask you directly, have you ever had any romantic or sexual contact with Marcus Chen? Never. Not even close. Marcus is married with a son, and even if he weren't, I would rather date a rabid Wolverine. Have you ever been alone with him in non-professional settings? The closest I've ever come to being alone with Marcus outside of work was when I got stuck in an elevator with him for 20 minutes last December. And I spent most of that time pretending to check emails on my phone to avoid conversation. Karen's voice came through the speaker again. Jim, Marcus is asking if we can expedite Sarah's termination while the investigation is ongoing. He's claiming he feels unsafe having her in the building while she's making these allegations. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Marcus, who had spent 2 years making me feel unsafe in my own workplace, was now claiming to be the victim. Actually, Lisa said suddenly, pulling out her phone, I think we should ask Marcus about the Romano's dinners he mentioned. Because Romano's has been closed for renovations since April. I know because I tried to book our quarterly team lunch there last month. There was a pause, then Karen's muffled voice as she relayed the question. We could hear Marcus's response getting louder and more agitated through the phone. He's now saying it was Lorenzo's, not Romano's, Karen reported. And he's asking why we're interrogating him like a criminal instead of focusing on Sarah's misconduct. Jim Peterson stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. Karen, tell Marcus we'll continue this conversation in 10 minutes. Don't let him leave the building or contact anyone outside the company. What are you thinking? Lisa asked. I'm thinking, Jim said grimly, that we need to verify a few things before this gets any more complicated. Jim pulled out his laptop and started typing rapidly. Lisa, I need you to pull Marcus's keycard access logs for the past 6 months. If Sarah was staying late for these alleged meetings, there should be a record of both of them in the building after hours. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized this could either vindicate me completely or make things infinitely worse. What if Marcus had stayed late on nights when I was working? What if the timing lined up in a way that supported his story? Sarah, Jim continued, I need your phone. We're going to scroll through your text messages with Marcus right now, in front of witnesses. I handed over my phone without hesitation, though my hands were trembling. The passcode is 847291. You can check everything, texts, calls, emails, photos. There's nothing there because nothing happened. Lisa looked up from her computer screen, frowning. This is interesting. According to the keycard logs, Marcus's access card shows him leaving the building at 5:47 p.m. on average over the past 6 months. Sarah, your card shows departures averaging 8:23 p.m. on weekdays, with weekend access on 12 different Saturdays. Because I was finishing the work he assigned and then left, I said. Marcus has a standing Friday afternoon golf game with his brother-in-law. He's mentioned it in at least 20 team meetings. Jim was scrolling through my phone, his expression growing more skeptical by the minute. Sarah, your text history with Marcus goes back 18 months, and there are exactly 47 messages total. Most of them are things like running 10 minutes late to the Peterson meeting and updated presentation is on the shared drive. The most personal message here, Lisa added, reading over Jim's shoulder, is from last Christmas when you wrote, hope you and Diana have a wonderful holiday. That's not exactly seduction material. My phone started buzzing with an incoming call while Jim was still holding it. He glanced at the screen and his eyebrows shot up. It's someone named Jennifer Walsh. The room went completely silent. Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's previous hire who'd quit after 6 weeks. The one whose HR exit interview had mentioned inappropriate comments and unwanted touching. Answer it, I said quickly. Put it on speaker. Jim swiped to accept the call. This is Jim Peterson, Senior Vice President at Meridian Marketing. I'm here with Sarah Chen and Lisa Chen from Finance. You've reached Sarah's phone. Oh, came a surprised female voice. I was calling Sarah directly. Is everything okay? Jennifer, I said, it's Sarah. We're in a meeting right now, but your timing is actually perfect. Can you tell Jim and Lisa what you told me yesterday about your experience working for Marcus? There was a pause, then Jennifer's voice came through clearer. Are you sure? I mean, I know I said I'd be willing to talk officially if needed, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. Jennifer, Jim interjected, this is Jim Peterson. If you worked for our company, I'd like to hear about your experience. This is completely voluntary, but we're currently investigating some workplace conduct issues. Marcus Chen is still working there, isn't he? Jennifer's voice had gone flat. That's why I'm not surprised Sarah called me yesterday. I've been waiting for something like this to happen. Lisa leaned toward the phone. What exactly did you experience during your time here, Jennifer? Where do I start? Jennifer's bitter laugh came through clearly. The comments about my appearance during team meetings. The way he'd stand behind my chair and put his hands on my shoulders while I was working. The dinner invitations that weren't really invitations because refusing them meant poor project assignments. Jim and Lisa exchanged glances. Jennifer, did you ever report these incidents? I tried to bring it up with Marcus directly first, thinking maybe he didn't realize how his behavior was being perceived. His response was to tell me I was misinterpreting friendly mentorship and that I seemed overly sensitive to normal workplace interactions. The words hit me like a lightning bolt of recognition. Overly sensitive. The exact phrase Marcus had used to describe me in my March performance review. When I finally went to HR, Jennifer continued, Marcus had already started documenting performance issues with my work. Suddenly, every project I touched was below expectations and I was struggling to adapt to company culture. They made it clear that it would be my word against his, and he had 18 months of stellar reviews while I had 6 weeks of problems. So you quit, Lisa said softly. I quit because I realized the system was designed to protect people like Marcus, not people like me. But Sarah, when you called yesterday asking about my experience, I started thinking maybe things could be different now. Jim looked at me sharply. Sarah, when exactly did you call Jennifer? My stomach dropped as I realized how this might look. Yesterday afternoon, after Marcus announced my demotion. I remembered her exit interview mentioned similar issues to what I was experiencing, so I thought. You thought you'd coordinate your stories, Jim finished, his voice cooling. No. Jennifer's voice came through the speaker forcefully. Jim, Sarah didn't coach me on anything. She asked one question, whether my experience with Marcus involved inappropriate behavior that made me uncomfortable. I told her the same thing I told HR 18 months ago, and the same thing I'm telling you now. Karen's voice suddenly crackled through the conference room intercom. Jim, we have a situation. Marcus just tried to access Sarah's computer and several shared network drives. When I asked him to step away from the terminal, he said he was securing sensitive documents that Sarah might have compromised. Building security had to physically escort him away from the workstation. The pieces of Marcus's desperation were falling into place, and none of them painted him as the victim he was claiming to be. The intercom crackled again, Karen's voice tight with stress. Jim, there's more. When security pulled Marcus away from Sarah's computer, they found him trying to delete files from the shared marketing drive. Specifically, he was in the folder containing all the original Meridian campaign materials. My blood turned to ice. Those files contained the original timestamps, my research notes, the email chains with the client, everything that proved the campaign was my work. Did he delete anything? Jim asked sharply. Security stopped him before he could complete the deletion, but the IT logs show he accessed 17 different files in Sarah's project folders over the past 12 minutes. Marcus claimed he was reviewing work product to ensure nothing confidential was compromised, but when Karen asked him to explain why he needed to delete files to review them, he started talking about evidence tampering. Lisa Chen looked up from her laptop, her face pale. Jim, I'm showing unusual activity on Marcus's corporate card from this morning. 2 charges, one at OfficeMax for a paper shredder, and another at a FedEx store for document destruction services. The room went dead silent except for Jennifer's breathing through the phone speaker. He's destroying evidence, I whispered. He knows I have copies of everything, so he's trying to eliminate the originals and claim I fabricated them. Jim's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and his expression shifted to something approaching alarm. Marcus just sent a message to Karen claiming that Sarah has been unstable and vindictive since he rejected her advances 6 months ago. He's now saying he's been documenting her erratic behavior and threats because he was afraid for his safety. 6 months ago, Jennifer's voice came through clearly. Sarah, what happened 6 months ago? I thought back to October, trying to remember anything significant. Then it hit me. The Morrison Industries presentation. That's when I first directly questioned why my name wasn't included in the credits. Marcus told me I was being unnecessarily possessive about collaborative work. And that's when his documentation of your performance issues became more frequent? Lisa asked, scrolling through what I assumed were my personnel files. Actually, yes. Before October, my reviews were generally positive with minor areas for improvement. After October, suddenly I was struggling with strategic thinking, team collaboration, and professional communication. Jim was typing rapidly on his phone. Karen, I need you to pull the security footage from October 15th through 20th, specifically, any interactions between Sarah and Marcus in common areas, conference rooms, or near their workstations. The wait felt eternal. Jennifer stayed on the line, occasionally murmuring supportive comments, while Lisa continued cross-referencing Marcus's expense reports with his increasingly frantic explanations to HR. Finally, Karen's voice returned. Jim, I've reviewed the October 15th footage. There's a 12-minute conversation between Sarah and Marcus in conference room B after the Morrison presentation. Sarah appears calm and professional throughout. Marcus's body language becomes increasingly agitated. At one point, he slams his hand on the table and points directly at Sarah's face. She doesn't respond emotionally, just gathers her materials and leaves. That doesn't look like someone making unwanted advances, Lisa observed. No, Jim agreed, it looks like someone asking legitimate questions and getting an inappropriate response. Karen's voice crackled through again, but this time she sounded almost breathless. Jim, you need to get down here immediately. Marcus just admitted to his wife Diana that he's been borrowing company funds for personal expenses, but he claims Sarah was blackmailing him into it. Diana is here in the lobby, and she's asking very specific questions about the Tiffany receipt and the Cabo trip that supposedly happened during a business meeting she thought she attended with him. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Marcus's wife was here. Diana, the woman whose Valentine's Day earrings had been purchased with company funds, was standing in our lobby asking questions about business trips she thought she'd taken with her husband. Jim, I said quietly, Diana Chen thinks she went to Cabo with Marcus in March. She thinks it was their anniversary trip. Jennifer's voice came through the phone speaker. Oh my god. Sarah, he told his wife that business trips were romantic getaways? That's sociopathic. Jim was already heading toward the door. Lisa, stay here with Sarah. Keep Jennifer on the line, we may need her statement officially. Karen, I'm coming down now, and I want Marcus isolated from his wife until we sort this out. But it was too late. Through the conference room's glass wall, I could see the elevator opening on our floor, and Diana Chen stepped out with the purposeful stride of a woman who'd been lied to one too many times. She was petite, impeccably dressed, and carrying a manila envelope that looked ominously familiar. Behind her, Marcus emerged from the stairwell looking like he'd been running. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there were visible sweat stains under his arms. When he saw Diana, he stopped dead in his tracks. Diana, honey, you shouldn't be here right now, he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the hallway. This is a very complicated situation. Complicated? Diana's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. Marcus, I have credit card statements. I have hotel receipts. I have emails from Cervantes Marketing Solutions bouncing back as undeliverable because the company doesn't exist. Lisa Chen grabbed my arm. Sarah, Marcus told his wife that the Cabo trip was a couple's retreat, but he billed it to the company as a business meeting. Through the glass, I watched Marcus approach his wife with his hands raised in a calming gesture. Diana, Sarah has been feeding you false information to try to destroy my career. She's been obsessed with me for months, and when I rejected her advances? Diana cut him off by pulling a stack of papers from her envelope. Sarah didn't give me this information, Marcus. American Express did. When I called to dispute what I thought was fraudulent activity on our account. The hallway went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. I could see Karen from HR hovering near the elevator, clearly unsure whether to intervene or retreat. You told me the Cabo trip was our anniversary present, Diana continued, her voice getting stronger. You said you'd saved for months to surprise me with a romantic getaway. But according to American Express, it was charged to Meridian Marketing as a business expense. Marcus's face cycled through several expressions before settling on desperate charm. Honey, I can explain everything. The company has a policy where we can bring spouses on certain business trips if we pay the difference. Then explain the Tiffany receipt, Diana interrupted, pulling out another document. The earrings you gave me for Valentine's Day, that you said you bought with your bonus money? Also charged to Meridian Marketing as client appreciation gifts. Jennifer's voice came softly through the phone speaker. Sarah, is this really happening? Unfortunately, yes, I whispered back. Diana held up a final piece of paper. And explain this, Marcus. A receipt from Dick's Sporting Goods for $1,200 worth of baseball equipment for Tyler. Equipment that you told me your parents bought for his birthday. Through the glass, I watched Marcus's last shred of credibility disintegrate in real time. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while his wife stood there with 18 months of his lies laid out in black and white. Diana, he finally managed, you have to understand the pressure I've been under. Sarah has been threatening to destroy my career Unless you what, Marcus? Diana's voice was deadly quiet now. Unless you bought me jewelry with stolen money? Unless you lied to me about romantic trips that were actually fraud? Unless you taught our son that cheating and lying are acceptable? The silence that followed was deafening. Diana's voice carried down the hallway with crystalline clarity, and explained this, Marcus. She pulled out what looked like a bank statement. 3 cash advances totaling $8,000 over the past 2 months. Money that came out of Tyler's college fund. Money you told me was for emergency business expenses that the company would reimburse. I felt Lisa's grip tighten on my arm. Through the phone, Jennifer made a small sound of disbelief. Marcus looked like he was about to collapse. Diana, please, not here. We can discuss this at home. We're discussing it right here, right now, Diana cut him off. Because I called Meridian's accounting department an hour ago, Marcus. They have no record of any emergency expenses requiring employee cash advances. They also have no record of reimbursement requests from you for any business-related emergency. Karen from HR stepped forward cautiously. Mrs. Chen, perhaps we should move this conversation to a private conference room. No. Diana's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I'm tired of private conversations. I'm tired of being lied to. And I'm especially tired of my husband using our family as props in his embezzlement scheme. The word embezzlement hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Through the glass wall, I could see other employees starting to gather in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Marcus made one last desperate attempt at damage control. Diana, Sarah has been manipulating you. She's been feeding you false information because she's obsessed with destroying our family. Everything you think you know is. Everything I think I know came from our credit card company, our bank, and the receipts in your desk drawer at home, Diana interrupted. The same receipts you've been hiding in your toolbox in the garage for the past year. Lisa Chen leaned toward the phone. Jennifer, are you hearing this? Every word, Jennifer replied grimly. Sarah, this is exactly what I was afraid would happen to the next woman who tried to stand up to him. He was always going to try to destroy her credibility by making it personal. Diana pulled out another document, and even from across the hallway I could see it was printed on official letterhead. I also have this, Marcus. A letter from Tyler's baseball coach asking why the team equipment you promised to donate never materialized. Equipment that, according to your expense reports, you purchased for the team but somehow ended up in our son's bedroom. The crowd in the hallway was growing larger. I could see Tom from accounting, Jessica from social media, even Mr. Henderson from the executive floor. Marcus's public humiliation was happening in real time, witnessed by everyone who'd watched him take credit for other people's work over the past 2 years. Mrs. Chen, Jim Peterson's voice carried from the elevator as he finally arrived on our floor. I think we should continue this discussion in my office. Diana turned to face Jim, and I could see tears in her eyes for the first time. Mr. Peterson, I need to know how long this has been going on. How long has my husband been stealing from your company while making me complicit in spending the money? Jim's face was grim. Mrs. Chen, we're still investigating the full scope. The full scope, Diana said, her voice breaking slightly, is that my marriage is built on lies and stolen money. The full scope is that my son's baseball equipment, my anniversary trip, my Valentine's Day gift, all of it was purchased with money my husband embezzled from you. She turned back to Marcus, who was now leaning against the wall like he needed it to stay upright. I want a divorce, Marcus. And I want you out of our house tonight. The hallway erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Marcus looked around desperately, as if searching for someone, anyone, who might still believe his version of events. His eyes landed on me through the conference room glass, and for a moment, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Pure, undiluted hatred. Marcus's expression of hatred lasted only a moment before he seemed to remember where he was and who was watching. His face shifted back to that practiced look of wounded professionalism, but I'd seen what was underneath now, and it terrified me. Jim, Marcus said, pushing himself off the wall with visible effort, I think we need to discuss the security implications of having Sarah in the building while she's making these false accusations. My wife has clearly been manipulated into. Your wife, Jim interrupted coldly, has credit card statements and bank records. Those aren't manipulated, Marcus. Those are facts. Diana was still standing in the hallway, clutching her manila envelope like a shield. The crowd of employees had grown to include most of our floor, and I could see people pulling out their phones. By tomorrow, this would be office legend. Mrs. Chen, Karen from HR said gently, we should get you some privacy while we sort this out. Privacy? Diana's laugh was bitter. Mr. Peterson, how many other employees knew what my husband was doing? How many people watched him steal money and buy my jewelry with it and said nothing? The question hung in the air like an accusation. I could see the discomfort ripple through the crowd of onlookers. How many of them had suspected something but stayed quiet? How many had been too intimidated by Marcus to speak up? Jennifer's voice came through the phone speaker, barely audible. Sarah, this is getting dangerous. Marcus looks like he's about to snap. She was right. Marcus was scanning the crowd with increasing desperation, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When his eyes found mine again through the glass, he started walking toward the conference room. I need to speak with Sarah, he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. This has gone far enough. Jim moved to block his path. Marcus, you're not speaking to anyone without legal representation present. Legal representation? Marcus's voice cracked. Jim, I've worked for this company for 3 years. I've generated millions in revenue. I built relationships that. You've stolen $47,000, Lisa Chen said flatly, looking up from her laptop. And according to the expense reports I'm reviewing, that's a conservative estimate. The actual amount might be closer to $60,000. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. $60,000. 2 years' worth of someone's salary, stolen in 18 months to buy baseball equipment and anniversary trips. Marcus spun around to face Lisa, his composure finally cracking completely. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The expectations, the quotas, the constant demands from corporate. I was going to pay it back once I got my promotion. What promotion? Jim asked sharply. The VP position that's opening up in January. I was guaranteed that role based on my performance metrics, which means I would have had the salary to repay everything I borrowed. Borrowed. He was still calling it borrowed. Diana's voice cut through Marcus's explanation like glass. You told me that VP promotion was already confirmed. You said we could afford the new house because your salary was increasing by $40,000 in January. The new house. I watched Marcus's face go white as another lie unraveled in public. We're not buying a house, Diana continued, her voice getting stronger. We're not doing anything together anymore. And Tyler is going to have to learn that his father is a thief. That's when Marcus finally snapped. This is all Sarah's fault, he screamed, whirling around to point at me through the glass. None of this would have happened if she'd just done her job instead of obsessing over me. She's been documenting everything, planning this for months, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy my life. The hallway went dead silent except for Marcus's heavy breathing. You're right, I said, standing up and walking to the conference room door. I did plan this. For 14 months. I stepped into the hallway, facing Marcus directly for the first time since this began. And it worked perfectly. The silence that followed my admission was absolute. Marcus stared at me like I'd just confessed to murder, while everyone else processed what I'd said. For 14 months, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I documented every lie, every stolen idea, every fraudulent expense. I kept copies of everything because I knew that eventually, Marcus would push too far. And when he did, I wanted to be ready. Diana was staring at me with something that looked like gratitude. You knew about the expenses? I knew about all of it, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her Jennifer's contact. Including the fact that I wasn't the first woman Marcus tried to destroy when she threatened his comfortable system of theft and credit stealing. Sarah, Jim said cautiously, are you saying you've been conducting your own investigation? I'm saying I've been protecting myself the only way I could, I replied. By making sure that when Marcus inevitably tried to gaslight me, manipulate me, or destroy my reputation, I'd have enough evidence to prove the truth. Marcus made a strangled sound. You manipulative. Marcus, I cut him off, the manipulation was you stealing my campaigns and presenting them as your own work. The manipulation was you giving me performance reviews that contradicted your emails to clients praising my strategies. The manipulation was you making your wife think stolen money was anniversary gifts. I turned to address the crowd that had gathered. How many of you have watched Marcus take credit for other people's work? How many of you have seen him throw employees under the bus when projects he stole went wrong? How many of you were too afraid to speak up because he controlled your careers? The murmurs that rippled through the crowd told me everything I needed to know. Sarah's right, Tom from accounting said suddenly. The Patterson contract revision that saved us $200,000 last year? That was Jessica's analysis, but Marcus presented it to the board as a strategic insight. And the social media campaign that landed the Morrison account, Jessica added, stepping forward. I designed the entire strategy, but somehow Marcus's name was the only one on the presentation to corporate. More voices joined in. 2 years' worth of stolen credit, falsified reviews, and intimidation tactics spilled out as people realized they weren't alone in their experiences. Marcus looked around desperately as his carefully constructed reputation crumbled in real time. This is a coordinated attack. Sarah organized this to destroy me. Marcus, Diana said quietly, Sarah didn't organize anything. She just told the truth. Something you apparently haven't done in years. Jim Peterson stepped forward, his expression grim. Marcus, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You're not to contact any employees, access any company systems, or return to the premises. Our legal department will be in touch regarding restitution and potential criminal charges. Jim, you can't. I have contracts, relationships with clients. You have 18 months of documented fraud and 2 years of workplace misconduct, Jim replied flatly. Security is waiting. As 2 security guards appeared at the elevator, Marcus made one last desperate play. Sarah, you think you've won something here? You have no idea what you've cost yourself. No company will hire someone who systematically destroys their supervisors. Your career is over. I looked at him calmly, feeling something settle in my chest like a door finally closing. Marcus, my career was never the problem. You were. As security led him away, Diana approached me with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said simply. For having the courage I didn't have. 3 weeks later, I was promoted to senior marketing coordinator with a $22,000 salary increase. The Meridian campaign I developed became a company-wide case study in strategic thinking. And Marcus? Last I heard, he was facing federal fraud charges and working part-time at his brother-in-law's insurance agency. Sometimes the best revenge really is just telling the truth.